Hello, I'm Rob Curley. I am the editor of the Spokesman-Review. And today we are having another one of our Northwest Passages virtual community forums. And today we have Washington Governor Jay Inslee, and he will be in conversation with our senior State House reporter, Jim Camden. So I am going to shut up and let you two talk about adult subjects while I go play PlayStation or something. So.
Thanks, Rob. Governor, welcome to Northwest Passages. Or maybe I should say welcome back. 2 summers ago, we were both in Spokane at the Civic Theater, and we had our Pints and Pies or Pints and Politics forum. And unfortunately, I cannot offer you a pint of microbrewery like I did that night. So we'll have to deal with like tea, I think. But
No, you can do two next time I'm in Spokane.
that's a deal. I'll get you two. You did have a major announcement today, and I want to give you a chance to tell our viewers about it and talk a bit about where the state is right now in this time of coronavirus.
Yeah, well, we've had some successes in our state in bending the curve. As you know, we've bent the curve down as much or more than any other state. And that's because people have really put their shoulder to the wheel and they've stayed home and stayed healthy. And there's been huge compliance with our initiative. So we've had some early success, and that has allowed us to have the time to work with the construction industry to start bringing back some of the construction work, what you might think of as low risk projects where we can maintain social distancing, where we can have protocols that are safe. And we've been working on this since early April with contractors and with the folks doing the work and unions. And we've reached a consensus about how to do that in a safe way. So we announced today that we've released the restriction on low risk construction under the assumption that people will use these protocols to stay safe. And it's kind of a first step, we hope many steps, bringing back our economy, which we know we cannot do fully today because that would risk this infection rate just exploding again. But this was a measure that we felt safe doing. And I want to thank everybody working on that to allow that first step.
So, how much construction do you think will come back, and how quickly? Have you done any projections or thoughts about that?
We really haven't. We had representatives in the industry today, and they really did not have any particular percentages either. I think it will be substantial. I think most projects can have considerable work on them without being within 6 feet of them. There might be certain things that you can't do. That would be step two, and we're working on some new approaches to that. But I think it will be considerable, and I think that's a good thing. Obviously, in housing, this is important. We know we have a low-income housing shortage and a housing shortage in general. We know we've heard stories of families that have sold their home and can't move into their new home. That's extremely frustrating. So I think it is a step forward, and there's more steps to come. But I just want to reiterate, it's kind of, we have to mix glee at being able to do this and celebration with the recognition that we're just a long ways away from being able to open up the whole economy. And the reason is that we've done very, very sophisticated assessment of the metrics of where we are in this virus, the percentage of positive tests, the number of daily COVID-like symptoms that go into our emergency rooms, the number of people who are hospitalized, the fatality rate, the surge capacity, all of these things. We have a lot of data. And all of that data points to one conclusion, which is if we removed all of these restrictions like a light switch, this virus is going to come roaring back. And we do not want to look like New York. And our hearts have gone up to the people of New York. We just can't run that risk. So this is going to be a dial, not a light switch. We started this today. I think we've made some really good decisions because we've listened to one another, and I'm happy to start this process. We have a long ways to go.
Now, other states have had more construction or not shut down construction at all. Have they seen a big increase in their statistics because of that? Do you know?
There really is not a good way to look at a cause and effect relationship. the science is not that acute to really figure that out. We started with a little more aggressive approach than some other states, in part because we got hit earliest and kind of hardest. So we thought we had to jump on this a little earlier than some other states did. Now, that appears to have had success because we have bent the curve down more or as much or more than any other state. So I think you could say that what we did was at least arguably right because it has been successful. Now, maybe we got lucky somewhat too along the way. We don't know for sure. But now I'm just glad that we're able to do some reasonable things to help out get some more people back to work. But we're going to continue to realize that this virus is not a defeated enemy. We've kind of we've brought the infection rate so it's kind of stable, which is good because every person who had the infection was infecting probably 3.8 people when we started this effort. Now we've got that down maybe to 1 to 1, but we have to get it down below 1 to actually reduce the number of people that are infected a day so that we can release the social distancing. And as you know, when we do this, at the same time, we have to have a really strong testing and contact tracing and isolation army stood up so that we can prevent this infection from coming back.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know the new guidelines call for personal protective equipment, PPE, on the job site, but there's been a shortage of PPE, and I'm wondering, are you worried that construction sites requiring PPE is going to take from the equipment that the hospitals and the nursing homes and the first responders need?
Well, we have always had concerns about PPE. The good news is we have about 85 million pieces of PPE coming to the state of Washington that are actually in the pipeline today. The industry believes they can do this considerable amount of construction. They think they do have access to PPE. So it's something that is a concern. We will continually monitor this. Look, this can go south too. This is a step forward. But if we find out that we don't have enough PPE or that the virus starts coming back, we may have to retrench. We got to be very agile here. We've got to monitor and we've got to adapt in the weeks and months to come. And we have to be willing to do that. But we're doing everything we can to increase the PPE supplies. It looks to me like we'll be able to do a reasonable thing here.
So the construction industry, it'll have to get its own PPE, as I understand it. They won't get it from the state stockpiles?
That's correct. So they'll have to have their own supply chains. We've got to reserve any state stockpiles for the medical system and emergency responders.
Okay. So state residents, should they stay tuned for new guidelines on other industries in the very near future?
Yes, we're giving consideration to outdoor recreation issues. We're giving consideration to elective surgery issues to see if we can bring back some more elective surgery. But again, we've got to do that in a way that doesn't overstress the hospitals or overstress the PPE supplies in the medical system. So those things are under consideration. And as time goes on, we will look at other industries. And I think this is a kind of a template for other industries because we want to get them in advance having protocols ready to go when the dial is such, when the metrics are such, when the fatalities and infection rates are down far enough, when the contact tracing army is stood up, that they can get going. So those conversations will proceed. We're getting good advice from a variety of businesses. I talked to the CEO of Target the other day about how some of their protocols for retail can work. And we're talking to small business as well, obviously.
Right.
But we do want that progress to continue. But you can't do it today, because if we did it today, we'd be right back in the soup.
Right. So since you mentioned recreation, we're getting emails and queries from viewers right now, and I've got to tell you that Louis and Rick and Steve and Tom, and probably everybody else, because whenever we write about fishing and hunting, the clicks that we get online are off the charts. So they want to know about fishing. And will fishing be among the recreational changes that you might lift? And even some of them want to know, well, why fishing? Because when I go fishing, I'm by myself anyway.
Yeah, this is a hard issue because there's so many things we do by ourselves, but they still result in physical contacts. So what the epidemiologists and the public experts, health experts have told us when we started this is the name of the game is to reduce movement, because when you reduce movement, you reduce physical interactions. First off, you drive in the car with your friend and you're in the same car. Maybe you get the disease from them or you give it to that person. You stop at the gas station, you buy a candy bar, and you have an interaction with the person across the counter. You go to the bait shop, you buy bait, you have an interaction. You catch a whole load of fish and talk to people at the boat ramp. Then you go home with a big string of fish and you show your brother how you did and have a beer on the way home. So it all seems very innocent, but over time, these things have an impact. Now, the good news for people who want to go fishing, yes, when we release restrictions on outdoor recreation, fishing is going to be part of that. We are considering that literally today. And so I think people are going to hear some information about this in the next few days. And I hope they'll be happy about it. And I want to thank people's patience while they're going through this. And I know it sounds benign, but because we have put aside some of our personal enjoyment things in the last several weeks, we have saved people's lives. Look, there are hundreds of people who have died in other states because they have not been as successful doing some of the things we have done in Washington, even though they've been frustrated. So for those who've been frustrated for a few weeks, I can tell you there's been a payoff because people are alive because of that. And I think we're now in a place that we can start to return to some of our activities, but we've got to be mindful. And we'll talk some more probably next week.
Okay. And Steve, and you realize that the golf courses, and there are good golf courses in Spokane, and they're greening up right now. Steve wants to know about golf. Is that under consideration for recreation?
Yes, but many people don't consider golf recreation. They consider it a very acute form of torture, actually. So, but for Steve, who I know is a great golfer, I'm sure he's got a one handicap. Yes, that is under consideration. And I have this on my mind since my wife is a very good golfer. She's beaten me for 50 years now, literally. My father-in-law was a golf pro. My brother-in-law was one of the better teaching pros in Seattle, Bill Tyndall, or in the state actually. He won the 1964 National Junior Amateur. So I do have golf in mind, even though I'm very, very terrible.
So, and you have some internal pressure for golf too, I would guess. So that'll be good news for the golfers in Spokane to know that
are well represented in my family. I will say that. But I will just tell you though, talking to my friends who are golfers, they want to get back, but I do think they have understood some of this mission statement that we're on. And yeah, we're all itching to get back into play. I think we're going to start to be able to do that. But we've done some good work together. Don't forget that.
Mm-hmm. So I've got an email from Anne, who is her mother is in a nursing home, and she hasn't been able to see her for a long time, and she understands why, and she understands the tug between the heart and the head on this, but she wants to know if you can say where in the dialing back of the things that we'll be able to do to get back to normal. Do you think families being able to visit their loved ones in nursing homes and long-term care facilities would be?
Well, we're really eager for that day because we know how tough it is not being able to hug your mother or your grandmother. I've got a 102-year-old mother-in-law. We really wish we could go give her a hug now. We call a lot, we get flowers and cards, but that doesn't make up for having a hug. What I can say is we need to get the infection rate down so that the risk of somebody going into a nursing home and infecting 100 people with high level of death, when we get that infection rate down low enough so that risk is substantially reduced, then we can release the ability of people to go into these homes. We're quite a ways away from that right now. we've reduced the infection rate maybe from 3.8 per person to 1. But it needs to get down there a lot lower before we can have confidence of that. And we know how terrible this is when that gets running through. We lost, what is it, 44 souls at one long-term care facility in Kirkland. You just do not want to see that happen. And unfortunately, we have COVID positive cases in over 100 of our long-term care facilities right now. This is the nightmare, frankly, to think that these could blow up. So we have put strike teams into dozens of nursing homes of public health officials, some of the federal officials, who have helped the nursing homes have as strong an infection control as possible to save as many lives as possible. So we hope this day comes soon. I can't tell you when it is, but we love these people in these homes. We don't want to lose them. And I think the right course right now is for a show of love by communicating with them electronically.
Mm-hmm. So I know that the restrictions on visiting nursing homes were among the first things that happened. So is it possibly first in, last out sort of situation?
I think that's probably a decent way to think of it. It's not a perfect relationship, but it probably makes sense in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
And I know people are really lusting for dates and specificity on this. I would love to be able to say, on X date, the virus is going to be gone. And I just can't do that and tell the truth in this situation. We just don't know. Mm-hmm. I just don't take the approach, that the president took when he said, it's going to be gone by Monday. I can't do that. What I can do is to say that we are intensely focused on doing everything we can today. So today is the most important date I can give you to drive this virus down so that that date will be earlier rather than later. It's certainly not going to be May 4th. There are going to be restrictions by necessity past May 4th. And we're doing everything we can to minimize the distance to when we can open everything up. But I can't tell you it's today.
Mm-hmm. So Jake had an education-related question, and basically he wonders if you could talk about what's being done to make sure the kids will be back in school this fall.
Well, we're all making, I hope, and I think we are, decisions that will reduce the infection rate. Because if we drive the farther down we drive the infection rate, the more likely we'll be able to open our schools in the fall. Every time when we're sick, we don't go to work. Every time we abide by this order and maybe miss a golf game for a few more days. Every time we help buy groceries for an older person so they don't have to go to the grocery store and expose themselves to infection. Every time we do one of those things, that's the most successful thing we can do to make it more likely that we can start school again in the fall. And the reason I say that is that I think it's because these things we do on a daily basis are so matters of habit, because they're benign. Sometimes we don't realize how kind of heroic are the consequences of those things. So when you shop for a person who's 75, so they don't have to go to the grocery store, you might save a life. You won't know who the life that is. It might be the person you're helping, or it might be somebody else. But it all adds up, and that's how you win these wars, is one battle at a time, one person at a time.
I've got several calls or several questions about that, but the county and city officials in the Spokane area are looking at pushing to open up Spokane or other regions before some of the more hard affected areas like the Puget Sound are. So what are the chances that Spokane or some areas in Eastern Washington will be given a green light to be further ahead on opening up their economy than, say, Seattle will be?
Well, I think that might be possible on segments. So, for instance, we might be able to open up elective surgery in certain places earlier than other places because they have adequate PPE, because they have adequate surge capacity. I think that's a place that you might see some specialization of the orders. We'll be open to ideas in the future about these kind of suggestions. But I will say this, and this is one of the hard things, is that sometimes the most important restriction you can put on are the places where the infection has not hit. That's when they are most effective. Putting restrictions after the horse is out of the barn is not as effective. And we have seen infections be very devastating in Eastern Washington. They had to close a meat plant in Tri-Cities. There is a big infection in an agricultural worker facility in Chelan right now. We've seen big, significant outbreaks in Adams County. So, and what we're finding is that where we seem to be bending the curve down, we're doing that more successfully in the central Puget Sound area, where it still is going up in Eastern Washington in the non-Puget Sound central core. So we just are not out of the woods yet. And what's 10 cases in Spokane today could be 100 cases in the next week and a half, 2 weeks. So it's just something we have to be aware of. And it's very difficult because it's like things when you don't see them in front of you, it's more difficult to get ahead of the curve. We got to keep that in mind.
So is the state going to take action on places like the meatpacking plant in Wallula and the apple operation in East Wenatchee? Will the state step in and say you've got to close because you've got too many infections? You're making so much of an impact on the local community with your infections?
It's possible. It has not happened to date. Usually the local, when you say the state, the local county health departments have the initial jurisdiction of making those kind of local decisions. So it's likely if that happened, it would be a decision by the county authorities, the county health departments first rather than the state. And the first thing we do, presumably they would do, is to work to have the strongest protocols in place for those facilities. Now the state is currently, we do have under consideration rules to protect workers in the agricultural industry to avoid these potential shutdown circumstances. It's very important for people working in agriculture, but it's also important to maintain continuity of the food supply. So we're working diligently to get the right place to set that dial for safety while we continue to keep the agricultural industry functioning. And frankly, that's not easy because there's some real challenging circumstances where people work that we have to struggle with. So we're working on that right now.
Mm-hmm. Now, the state prevailed yesterday at the Supreme Court in the hearing over the early release of some inmates. We have some questions on that. Marianne wants to know, how are you deciding which persons to release from prison is it based on the crimes they're convicted? And we have another question saying, even if they're convicted of a non-violent crime, are you checking to make sure that they didn't plead down from a violent crime? And are people safe with these people that are being let out on the streets?
Yeah, what we've done, as you know, there was a court order. The state was ordered to do whatever is necessary to provide for the safety of people who are incarcerated. And in response to that order, and in sort of a common sense standpoint, we've looked at the system and figured out what we really needed to do to have a reasonable degree of safety. And we determined that we just did not have capacity to be able to isolate people who were positive, to give additional distance in the existing footprint of corrections. And we can't build a prison overnight. So we basically had an early release for about just over 1,000 people, might be a little more than that. And these are folks who are going to be released several months, 2 to 6, maybe 8 months earlier than they otherwise were going to be released. And we have restricted it to people who are incarcerated for nonviolent crime. But as the questioner suggested, we don't know exactly what led to the plea or the conviction at a certain level. So we've given notice to the prosecutors as much as we can. And on a few occasions, they said, wait a minute, that's not a good idea because John, pled guilty to something that originally was really violent. And we have put a hold on those people's releases. So we're working through this in a rational fashion. This is difficult, I know, but we had a court order, and these are situations where you have people living very closely that these infections get out of control. We don't want to see that, in part because these people are going to be released, and we don't want to see a big infection in our corrections. And these people are going to be released to their neighborhoods. So one way or another, we want to prevent these infections. That helps everybody, not just the incarcerated.
So are they being tested to see if they are infected before they are released? Because there is some infection in at Monroe anyway, and so I don't think you'd want to be releasing people who are COVID positive out into the community.
Yeah, the COVID positive people are in isolation, and all of the incarcerated people are checked on symptoms, make sure they don't have symptoms before they're released.
Mm-hmm. So and there was sort of a discussion going around about letting out murderers who are serving life without parole just because they are over a certain age or they have medical conditions. That wasn't ever being considered, was it?
No, but we have released what you think of as vulnerable people who have been convicted of non-violent crime. So there are some people who are over the age of 65 or have serious health compromise that have been released. And those are the people, obviously, this is a disease that can be fatal for anyone, but the vast majority of cases are people over the age of 65. So we give some consideration to that, but these are all non-violent offenders. I want to stress that. And we've been cautious to look at that.
Right. But people who were warning of murderers, Gary Ridgway being out on the streets, that just wasn't going to happen.
No, and the Supreme Court did not order it. We haven't done it.
Okay. So if these people that you're letting out early do commit a crime that injures someone, is the state liable for that? If instead of but for this early release, they would have still been in prison. I mean, the state was liable for some crimes that were committed when there was that mistake in the computer system and there were some early releases of inmates.
Well, I don't think the state should be liable. It was done pursuant to the court order. The Supreme Court of the state of Washington ordered the State Department of Corrections to do what is necessary to assure the health and safety of the incarcerated people. So I wouldn't think the state should be liable for that, responding to the court order. No, I don't think that should be the case. I don't think it would be the case.
Okay. You're a lawyer, I'm not. So, and I don't play one on TV. So I thought I'd ask.
This is a guarantee. I'm telling you sort of what I think. It's not a lead pipe guarantee. And look,
right.
We can't guarantee that would happen for these folks. It's a very difficult circumstance. There's no guarantees in that regard. What is guaranteed is we got an order from the Washington State Supreme Court. We followed the order. We have made rational decisions. We've tried to give notice to people and avoid people who have been violent being removed. And I think that's been a responsible decision.
I have a question from somebody who said they're married to, they're a U.S. citizen, but they're married to someone who is not a citizen. They're not going to get the federal stimulus check because they filed their taxes joint filing. Will the state have any aid for people in that situation? Do you know, or is it something that you'll have the legislature look at?
Well, I haven't heard that scenario. I'll have to check that out. I'm not sure that I would understand that. Why, if you're a citizen, you're kicked off the rolls because you're married to a non-citizen. That doesn't sound right to me. You might want to ask that person to call our office and see if that's really what's going on there.
Well, I can send you a link to it. They sent us a link that explained it to them, and it's from a usually reliable source. I think it's from the Washington Post. So
we'll check it out, obviously. And there's things the state can do, but look, at the federal government is is the deep bench and the checking account here. And we're hoping the state government or the federal government will provide us more aid. We certainly need it. And more test kits. We need more test kits.
More test kits. And how are things going with the your relations with the federal government right now? It seems like you have a good relationship with Vice President Pence, maybe not so good with his boss.
Yeah, I talk frequently with the vice president and cabinet members and administrators of the multiple agencies. We've had good lines of communication in that regard, and that's good. And the federal government has helped us in any number of ways. I mentioned these strike teams that go into our long-term care facilities. They have provided us some PPE. But the dire need right now from the federal government are test kits. We simply have to get the federal government to start the manufacturing capability of the United States to manufacture what we need to test people. And only the federal government is in a position to do that. We're doing everything we can to get these kits for Washingtonians, but they simply don't exist. We have to increase the manufacture of them nationally. So we need the president to really show some leadership here, and that's been lacking. So we need to get that going so that as we get the infection rate down, which we hope we will, we then can start stage 2, which is the testing and the contact tracing and the isolation of people so we can prevent this virus from coming back.
Mm-hmm. So I think our time is getting pretty close to running out, but we have one real quick question for you from a viewer who wants to know, when was the last time you got a haircut?
Easter morning. It was a very memorable morning because my wife gave me the first haircut she's given me for a few years. She used to cut my hair pretty regularly at first we were married, but she still has the clippers she had from 47 years ago. And I think she did a pretty good job. She also made a really nice Easter bonnet that I was pretty proud of.
Out of the hair?
What's that?
Out of the hair?
No, out of our flowers. The flowers are pretty prolific this year. She did a really nice Easter bonnet. I think she did a pretty serviceable job on blowing my ears too.
I was going to say some of the state officials are looking a little shaggy, and so she might want to hang up a shingle if you can give her a dispensation for cutting hair.
I'm a child of the '60s. I think we're just going to let our freak flag fly. So I'm happy to see that hair return.
Well, I see that our time is up. I would love to talk to you for a while, but I know that you've got something else on your schedule here. And so I want to thank you for taking part in our community forum. We will invite you back and maybe we'll get you back when people are traveling a little bit more. We can both travel back to Spokane and have another forum with live questioners in the audience and freshly poured microbrewers in the glasses.
I look forward to it. Thanks for sending your delegation. Eddie Billig has really been helping me a lot. Ormsby and Shelley, and we've been getting a lot of help. So thanks for what Spokane is doing for the state.
Okay.
Hey, thank you both for being a part of this. And Jim, it's always great to see you. I don't get to see you enough. And Governor, look, we could do one of these every week. You would not believe all the questions we have, and they're very good questions. So I hope you'll come back and talk to us again soon.
I'd be honored.
Thank you so much.
Wash your hands.
All right, everybody. Thank you for being a part of this. And next week, we will resume a much fuller schedule of community forums. So thank you all for being a part of this, and goodbye.